you make those sacrifices. Let's say I walk 10 miles a day as a black man to avoid and to put financial pressure on the system. What about people who aren't black? And there were several. I mean, the NAACP was at the center of a lot of these movements, including the bus boycott. And one of the things I talked with Bill Fletcher again about intersectionality and its importance, how valuable and important it is.
So there's a debate over the term intersectionality, how to define it, and I'll give you the Fletcher definition.
Right.
The Fletcher definition is that intersectionality is not primarily about identity. It's about social movements and contradictions. It's about forms of oppression and about how they come together and create flashpoints. It's like this. The difference between a layered cake and a dark chocolate cake, right? So a dark chocolate cake is one entity. A layered cake has these different contributions that contribute to a particular kind of taste precisely because of the different layers that are there. It's not just vanilla. It's not just strawberry. It's a combination, right? So when you're looking at intersectionality, what we're looking at is how do these different contradictions come together and these different social movements? And how do we make sure in prosecuting a struggle that we're not looking at this as a binary? We're not looking at this as a linear struggle, that every struggle has different layers to it, which makes it particularly unique. One of the real dangers we're looking at right now is when people talk about anti-Black racism, they frequently act as if anti-Black racism is the most demonic form of racism the world has ever seen, and that anyone else that lays claim to opposing racism is somehow appropriating our struggle. And that's simply wrong. That's simply wrong. When you look at just focusing on the United States, you see the struggle of the First Nations, Native Americans. You look at the struggle of the Mexicans and Mexican Americans after annexation. You look at the struggle of colonial peoples like the Puerto Ricans, and you see the way race plays itself out. Now, none of those struggles is the same as the other, but they all overlap. They have certain things in common. So when we're building a struggle around police violence, for instance, what we have to keep in mind is that it's not just a struggle around African Americans as victims of police violence. When you look at police violence, the population that has the most disproportionately the greatest victim of police violence have been Native Americans. And yet in the last several weeks, very few people have raised that. This is where the issue of intersectionality comes through, at least the Fletcher interpretation. So we've got to look at it not principally in terms of how do I see myself,
That's right.
but how do these different contradictions come together, and how can we as progressives help to fuse them so that we can win? How can we fuse them so we can build solidarity?
What's funny is not only there's somewhere in there there's a philosophical component to it. There's also just a practical component to it. So whichever is most interesting to you, I'm down. Like, you want more people involved.
I'm interested in the cake, for example. The cake sounds delicious. That was
you want some cake.
Delicious metaphor, man. I like that. I think what he's getting at is, like, if the goal is human liberation, if the goal is a better society where everybody feels safe, respected, has opportunities, and whatever system could bring that about, if that's what the goal is, then the multi-layered cake is the delicious path to getting there.
Yes.
Like, eating a bunch of single flavor cakes one at a time it just leaves people feeling disrespected. It leaves people feeling left out. It's incomplete. It doesn't come without its challenges. because he did kind of like temper it a bit by saying that, well, at the moment you look at what the flashpoint is, and like that's your focus.
That seems to me back to the strategy question. You know, flashpoints sometimes like intersecting the entire complexity of all the ways that we are being underserved in all of the different categories of the ways that we describe ourselves, and that's a lot, you know. So the flashpoint is like, okay, here's our so here's the thing that we can grab attention with. Here's the thing that we notice it's a strategy for getting people involved, but we know that this is part of a bigger thing, and that's so important. And disproportionality helps us understand who is particularly harmed, and it's important and it's helpful. But yeah, fixing those proportions doesn't get to the heart of it.